This video is a more descriptive account of why we are digging where it is that we are digging. And this answers many questions. It's come across several times. Why are you digging here? Why are you digging in this particular spot? And what I'm going to do is show the evidence of why it is we're digging where we are, and come up with some conclusions that will perhaps answer many questions that have recently been asked. To get to this particular video and to understand really very much about it, one would have to have reviewed the discovery video in its entirety. Also, a review of the geophysical primer of the hill and the ravine system would also assist in understanding this particular tape. If you recall, the discovery tape tells us how he found the ravine along this property line using two different treasure books and correlating the points. And we explained also how he came into the woods with his escort, his guide, and showed him where the Indian pots were. What it doesn't explain is how he broke twigs all the way out back to the vehicles so that he would know how to get back in there. And several days later, he had called his escort and told her that he had found something. When I spoke to Russell Burroughs in September of '94, I had asked him, said that with the decipherments and all that had been going on, I was definitely concerned about security and how many people actually knew where this tomb was. And he told me that he'd only taken 2 people to the tomb, and that they were Virginia Horrigan and Warren Dexter. Those were the only 2 people that knew where it was. And I really believe that, and I believe that he did take them because at that time he was definitely trying to vindicate the find. He had a concern for people to want to be interested in it. Virginia Horrigan had then informed me that her and Dexter Warren had both been to the same place. When I first came into the area and videotaped this region from an airplane, this was the first ravine that I went into, hence the name R1. And this is the second ravine that I went into, R2. These were the first 2 ravines that I looked at searching for the needle in the haystack. I had attempted to familiarize myself with the area as much as I possibly could before Miss Horrigan's arrival, and I had taken photographs along the bluff line here and over here. As we came to realize, this is the famous bluff that is in the book. When Virginia Horrigan came, she had all kinds of pictures from up here and along the ravine right there, R1. And when Russell took her into the woods to the ravine, instead of going the most direct way, right along this hill, down into the R2 ravine, out on the other side, and then up the hill there, and it's just a walk over this way, he chose to bring her all the way down here, and they crossed over and went back up this way, and then came down right here, and then went back up through this way. And he told her somewhere along in here that this is where it was. So I couldn't figure out why, if it was a decoy spot or it wasn't here at a time when he was attempting to vindicate his find, why would he take someone a mile out of their way, especially someone that perhaps had a rough time getting around in the first place? When Russell attacked us in the woods here, what impressed me was his familiarity with the woods themselves. He had had to come down out of this way and outflank us on the east. And then he came right over the top of the hill, boom! Right there is where he picked up the landowner's brother. It wasn't up here, it wasn't down here. It was right here. And then he marched him up the ravine this way to where we were sitting, right here where this creek goes into the ravine there. It was easy to establish that Virginia Horrigan's photographs had come from the R1 ravine. The photographs of the hominy holes and also the famous bluff, and the famous bluff that is in the book. The honey hole is the same photograph that's in all the magazines and several different books. From the time when Russell Burroughs attacked us in the woods, he began to lie about the location of the tomb. He kept saying that we were 9 miles away, 10 miles away, 4 miles away, 3 miles away. But he did say that we were on the to one person that we were on the property to the north and to the west of the target property of where his tomb was. And after we had spoken to Fred Reedholm, who also assisted with the book, he'd explained that he and his crew, Dr. Shears and I guess Dr. Sticky, had all come down the power line and I guess had taken an easier way into the tomb area. We also knew at that time that there was a missing hominy hole somewhere along this area. The best maps that we had showed the area right in the middle of the High Line to be a hot spot for this missing hominy hole, or right in this area, which is where I first dug at. And as we find out that there's people have seen honey holes right up in this area and in this area that are now covered over. And in a frantic search for this missing hominy hole, and believing that it was up this part of the ravine, I probed in this area quite well. I didn't come onto this property at all in that time. And I had probed all the way up these creeks here, again and again, several dig spots, many hours of labor in this area, until September of 1995. In September of 1995, the lady that lives right here went to the ASCS office. Her and her husband are the tenant farmers for this acreage that you see here, primarily in green. At this point, in 1988, when the photograph was taken, this was planted with a winter wheat, I believe. Alright? And she was down at the ASCS office obtaining information about the applications necessary to fill out permits to put it in the government erosion program. So when she was at the ASCS office, the gentleman in back of the counter had said, "Oh, you own that? You're farming that property right along next door to where some guys were in here the other day looking at the overhead photographs." And she said, "Oh yeah? Well, who was there?" He goes, "Some guy named Colonel Burroughs or General Burroughs or something was over here, was in there with another man looking at this property." And I was still at the time digging in the north part of the ravine, and I was made aware of that encounter several days, or actually about 2 weeks after it actually happened. So the gentleman at the ASCS office read the book and assisted us by informing us that the gentleman with Colonel Burroughs was Professor Shears. They were examining the overhead photograph of this property right here. At the time, I was trying to buy this property right here, this roughage. So I and one of my night guides said, well, let's just go take a look. We haven't been down here in so long. It's been several months since we'd been down in this area. So we went through here, went back down into R1, and we poked around at the hominy holes a little bit, and we did find rocks. We found authentic tomb stones that were indicative. They were both Lavanya, and we found them in this area right here. At that point, we knew that we had something hot, that this was perhaps the place to be looking for sure, and it was enough reason at that time to lease the property, so that's exactly what we did. All this time that everything was going on in 1995, Russ Burroughs had continued to slander me, to lie about me and various members of my party, and just make up the tallest tales that were just unbelievable. So this was all the part of the human nature vindicating my assumption that it was in here. The target area was right here. After leasing the property, I had spoken to Professor Shears on the phone, and I told him that we had leased this man's property right here. And he said to me, well, if you've leased that property, then you're pretty much sitting in the saddle, sitting in the driver's seat on the Burroughs Cave issue. Now, that made me even more excited, and there was still only one small piece of evidence that we did not have that I knew existed, and that was a map that Russ Burroughs had made several years ago, back in 1982, 14 years ago, just after he'd found it, so to alert some of his friends who were purchasing tablets from him of where he would be in case he didn't come back and he got stuck in the mud. And I'd known that this existed, but I felt like I was never going to be able to get at it. I had no idea. I had been promised that it was available, and I had been deceived somewhat until January 1996. Behold Mr. Burroughs' map of 1982. And even though it's hand-drawn and it looks somewhat barbaric, it is quite accurate. This is Olney to Flora, south on Route 45. Right here we go west on 161, we turn south into Helm, we come across the creek right here, this is the creek, the old bridge, and then it goes up and then off of the paper. And it comes up over here where it says old house here. He's got here written here. We'll look at this a little bit better in a second. But anyway, here's the curve over this way. And this is the curve that goes up on the actual Landsat photograph. Now we're looking at an exploded view of the diagram in the lower right hand corner. You'll notice here, this is the power line that he wrote. It says valley and valley. He's just got the word valley written twice. Doesn't mean that there's two valleys right there. It means that there's two valleys somewhere. And it says third pole, turn left into woods. You see 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. But he has right here along a property line a little arrow. See, there's an arrow here, and then he comes down like this. And there's a word here that I believe is fence, the word fence, but we couldn't tell very well. And it looks like you cross over a fence right here, and it dots into the woods right here, just south of the third power pole. This area here, where actually he has written here, is where he parked when he took Professor Shears and Fred Reed home. He parked right here. And that's why he's got here, because if he was going to be stuck in the mud, it would be right there. And of course, this is the Hickory Hill Church. And now we're going to look at this area on our Landsat. Let's review it again. Third power pole, left into the woods. This is another Landsat photograph. The power poles being right here, number 1, right here, number 2, and right here, number 3. Take number 3 left into woods, and you follow his little dotted line, and it goes where? Right there. The here, where it is he parked, is right in this little cove right here. You can pull south along this little trail here and make a left from the north, pull right there, and be very, very difficult to see, and trek back and forth this way. Hope this has answered the reason of why we are digging where we are digging, and it's simply because I have no reason to believe or suspect that what we're looking for is anywhere else except here. There has been nothing to indicate anywhere with our research and collection of data that this thing could be anywhere else than the R1 ravine.